For more, we're joined from Kyiv by Alexander Khara, the Executive Director of the Centre for Defence Strategies. He's also a former advisor to Ukraine's Defence Minister. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So after 2 days of trilateral peace talks in Geneva, no breakthrough in ending the war in Ukraine, but instead two very different views of where things stand right now, with Ukraine's President Zelensky dissatisfied with what he calls difficult talks, while the US sees meaningful progress being achieved. How do you explain such different assessments?
Well, it's just diplomatic parlance. We need to show that there is some progress, unless there is no reason to meet with Americans and the Russians. And from the other hand, obviously, there is no space for compromise between Ukraine and Russia. Russians want to subjugate or destroy Ukrainian statehood and now identity, and they want to survive. There is no possibility for any compromise. And Putin showed not a single sign of willingness to stop this war, and let alone to sign a peace agreement with Ukraine. Vice versa, the Russians are beefing up their the resources for the spring offensive. Until autumn, until the let's say time of winter coming, I don't think that there will be any real space for any real talks about stopping this war.
And we are hearing from a source that military-to-military trilateral talks in Geneva, held alongside those political discussions, have made, quote, incremental but significant progress in determining how a ceasefire would work, including finalising key terms and explanations to help lay the groundwork for future agreements. What does this indicate to you?
Certainly we can talk about hypothetical things in future when there is a political decision in the Kremlin to stop this war, and then where some troops should be deployed, what type of monitoring mission will be there. But the crucial thing that the Russians wants Ukraine to give up on the territory of Donetsk region, actually my native region, without fighting and without wasting lives of, let's say, 500,000 of Russians there. And certainly we are not in position to give this territory up for several reasons. First of all, we are not going to set the precedent and agree on this so-called territorial concession. Second, we can defend ourselves in those remaining towns. If we give up on them, the Russians would have an opportunity to go further into the neighboring regions, and nothing can stop them because of the terrain until the Dnipro River. So I don't think that the military are so ignorant of those facts. They possibly are talking about some hypothetical stuff in the future, and certainly we can agree on the way how a ceasefire can be implemented. But the key thing is Donbass, a key thing that Russians are not giving up on their maximalist goals against Ukraine. And unfortunately, they have manpower, they have economic resources, and they have China, which bails out Russia.
Let's talk more about that, because Ukrainian President Zelensky says the military representatives discussed issues seriously and substantively, but he said that compromises and meetings of leaders have not yet been sufficiently worked out. He's previously said that the US is expecting more concessions from Ukraine than Russia. What do you say to that?
Well, first of all, if we have a look at the opinion polls in Ukraine, majority of Ukrainians, some 70%, are for diplomatic solution. But at the same time, almost the same number are against the territorial concessions. So that's why I don't believe that there is a space for compromise even for Ukraine's president. And I don't think that he is going to commit political suicide by agreeing with Putin. The second thing, that Putin hates Zelensky for obvious reasons, and he disregards him. He doesn't believe that this legitimate leader. So that's why I do not believe that there is possibility of direct talks between Zelensky and Putin. And possibly Zelensky played this card because for us, all this diplomacy and this diplomatic track with Americans is to keep Americans at least neutral rather than fully on the Russian side. And that's why we need to show our willingness to compromise, our willingness to talk to Russians and things like that. But in reality, I don't think that Zelensky believes that it's possible to meet with Putin and agree on something. Actually, Zelensky was naive when he was elected that it's possible to settle everything with Putin while meeting him, according to the so-called Minsk arrangements. From the other hand, Putin believed that Zelensky is so inexperienced that he would undermine Ukrainian statehood. It didn't happen, and that's why Russians attack us for the second time. And I don't think that anything can change by just talking to Putin.
Alexander Khara, thank you so much for talking with us. We appreciate it. And we'll